Unaware of his mother's 8 million inheritance, he sold her house for pennies. She donated all. An elderly woman lost the only home she ever knew, betrayed by the very son she trusted. But when fate handed her a secret fortune, she didn't keep it, she gave it away, one act of kindness at a time. Her son thought he'd won. Instead, the whole town rose to her side, and her generosity sparked a battle that shook a family to its core. But can a mother's forgiveness heal a heart consumed by greed, or will her final gift tear them apart forever? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Autumn sunlight filtered through the maple trees, casting dapple shadows across Evelyn Carter's garden. Her weathered hands, marked with age spots and the memory of 1,000 gardening days, carefully pruned the last blooms of her prized roses. The flowers had witnessed 43 years of her life in this house, births and deaths, celebrations and heartaches. "The Lord's my shepherd, I'll not want," she hummed softly, her voice carrying on the crisp morning air. The melody brought comfort as it always had through every season of her 78 years. The rumble of an engine interrupted her reverie. Evelyn glanced up to see her son's silver sedan pulling into the gravel driveway, tires crunching over fallen leaves. She straightened slowly, one hand pressing against the small of her back as she rose from her kneeling position beside the flower bed. Daniel Carter emerged from the car, his tall frame unfolding with an impatient energy that had always marked him, even as a boy. He wore khaki pants and a button-down shirt that looked freshly pressed, his hair neatly combed, but something in his posture, a tightness around his shoulders, caught her attention. "Morning, Mom." His voice carried across the yard, the words clipped and formal. "What a lovely surprise." Evelyn smiled, peeling off her gardening gloves. "I wasn't expecting you until Sunday dinner." Daniel strode up the walkway, glancing at his watch. "Had some business in town. Thought I'd stop by." "Well, I'm glad you did. The roses gave us one last showing before winter." She gestured toward the vibrant blooms. "Your father always said these October roses were the most determined of the bunch." A flicker of something annoyance, impatience, crossed Daniel's face. "They're just flowers, Mom." "Maybe so." Evelyn's smile remained steady. "But they remind me of your father, stubborn and beautiful all at once." Daniel checked his watch again. "Listen, I can't stay long. Are you making that pot roast on Sunday? The one with the carrots?" "I certainly am. Sarah from church brought me some fresh vegetables from her garden." Evelyn tucked a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "Will you stay for a cup of coffee now? I just made a fresh pot." "Fine, but just quick." Inside her kitchen, with its faded floral wallpaper and well-worn countertops, Evelyn poured coffee into her good china cups, the ones reserved for company and special occasions. To her, every visit from her son deserved the good china. "Sugar?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "2 spoonfuls, and a little cream." Daniel drummed his fingers on the oak table that had been her mother's before her. They talked of small things, the weather, Daniel's work at the insurance office, the new pastor at Evelyn's church. But underneath ran a current of tension that Evelyn couldn't quite name. That evening, as Sunday dinner wound down and Evelyn served apple cobbler still warm from the oven, Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk about this house." Evelyn set down the serving spoon. "What about it? It's becoming a burden for you." Daniel's tone shifted to something softer, practiced. "The property taxes, the maintenance. That roof will need replacing soon." "I manage just fine," Evelyn said quietly. "Do you? Because from where I sit, this place is eating up your savings. It's too much house for one person." He leaned forward. "I think it's time to sell." The words fell like stones into still water. Evelyn stared at her son, her cobbler forgotten, heart suddenly pounding against her ribs. "This is my home, Daniel. It's an old house that's becoming a money pit." His voice hardened. "Be practical for once." Evelyn pushed back her chair, the legs scraping against the linoleum floor. "Excuse me," she whispered. "I need a moment." In the kitchen, she gripped the edge of the sink, fighting back tears as she gazed out the window at her roses, gilded by the setting Sunday. Morning light spilled through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across Evelyn's living room. She sat in her rocking chair, the gentle creaking a rhythm that had soothed her through countless mornings of solitude. In her hands, she held a faded photograph in a simple wooden frame James Carter on their wedding day, handsome in his suit, eyes crinkling at the corners with laughter. "What would you tell me to do, James?" she whispered, running her thumb across the glass. "This house holds every memory I have of us." The photograph offered no answers, only the same smile that had carried her through 46 years of marriage. She remembered the day they'd bought this house on Maple Street, how James had carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing like children, dreaming of the life they'd built together. The doorbell chimed, pulling her from her memories. She knew who it was before she answered. Daniel stood on the porch, clutching a leather portfolio stuffed with papers. The smile he offered didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning, Mom. Hope I'm not too early." "Never too early for my son." Evelyn stepped aside to let him in, noting how he surveyed the living room with a critical eye. Daniel wasted no time. He sat on the couch and spread glossy brochures across her coffee table, pushing aside her devotional book and half-finished knitting. "I found some great options." He tapped a brochure with a manicured finger. "Sunny Pines Retirement Village. They have social activities every day, a dining hall with chef-prepared meals, and staff available round the clock." Evelyn lowered herself back into her rocking chair. "It looks very institutional." "It's not a nursing home, Mom. It's independent living." Daniel flipped to another page. "Look, they have gardens, smaller than yours, but no maintenance required. And the cost? Affordable, especially after we sell this place." He pulled out a calculator. "I ran the numbers. Even at a conservative sale price, you'd have plenty left for comfortable living." Evelyn noticed he said conservative sale price, not fair market value. She'd lived long enough to recognize when words were chosen carefully. "I'm not sure, Daniel. This house is draining your resources," he interrupted. "The property taxes alone are ridiculous. And what about when the furnace goes out? Or when you can't manage the stairs anymore?" She glanced toward a staircase that led to the second floor, where she and James had slept side by side for decades. Recently, climbing those stairs left her winded, a fact Daniel had clearly noticed. "You can't live in the past, Mom. Dad will want you to be practical." The mention of James stung. "Don't tell me what your father would want." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he softened his tone. "I'm worried about you, that's all. Living alone in this big house isn't sustainable." He continued his pitch, showing her more brochures, leisure gardens, golden sunset villas, each looking more sterile than the last. The names alone made Evelyn feel ancient, as if she were being filed away somewhere pleasant but forgettable. As morning stretched into afternoon, Evelyn felt her resistance crumbling under the weight of Daniel's persistence. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps it was selfish to cling to a house too large for one elderly woman. "I could at least meet with a real estate agent," she conceded, finally, her voice small, "just to understand my options." Daniel's posture relaxed, victory evident in the set of his shoulders. "That's all I'm asking. I'll set it up for this week." Evelyn nodded, eyes fixed on the photograph in her lap as Daniel gathered his brochures. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall in front of him. This house was the last place she could still feel James's presence in the door frames he'd measured for her height, in the garden soil he'd turned each spring, in the bedroom where she still slept on her side of the bed. How could she explain to Daniel that selling the house felt like losing James all over again? 3 days later, Evelyn sat on her floral sofa as a whirlwind in a burgundy suit swept through her front door. Rebecca Mason, the realtor Daniel had selected, arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, clipboard in hand and smile fixed firmly in place. "Mrs. Carter, such a pleasure." Rebecca extended a manicured hand. "Your son has told me so much about this charming property." Daniel hovered near the entryway, keys jingling in his pocket. "Rebecca's the best in the county, Mom. Sold the Henderson place in under a week." Evelyn folded her hands in her lap as Rebecca began her tour. High heels clicking against the hardwood floors that James had refinished by hand 30 years ago. "These original floors are lovely," Rebecca noted, though her tone suggested an unspoken but. She tapped her pen against her clipboard. "Of course, most buyers today prefer open concept layouts." The realtor moved to the kitchen, running her fingers along the countertops. "Good bones in here. Absolutely good bones. The cabinets would need updating, perhaps a white or gray paint to brighten things up. Evelyn watched silently as the woman assessed her home like a surgeon evaluating a patient. The kitchen where she'd prepared thousands of family meals, where Daniel had done homework at the table, where James had surprised her with flowers on ordinary Tuesdays reduced to dated features and potential updates. The bathroom island. Vintage, Rebecca remarked upstairs, her voice carrying a practiced neutrality. Pink tile isn't exactly on trend, but someone might appreciate the retro charm. Daniel cleared his throat. We understand it will be priced accordingly. Of course, Rebecca agreed. We'll factor in the renovation costs when we set the listing price. Evelyn's throat tightened. James had installed that pink tile himself when they discovered they were having a baby, girl, a daughter they lost before birth. No one knew that story except Evelyn. Some memories couldn't be appraised or listed on a real estate flyer. After touring the second floor, they returned to the living room. Rebecca arranged papers on the coffee table while Daniel poured coffee into Evelyn's good china cups, the ones she only used for special guests. Based on my walkthrough and current market conditions, Rebecca began, I believe we should list at 285.0. Evelyn's head snapped up. But the Johnsons down the street sold for nearly 350.0 last year. Rebecca offered a sympathetic smile. Their kitchen and bathrooms were completely renovated, and they have central air conditioning. We can always start higher and negotiate down, Evelyn suggested. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. Mom, Rebecca knows the market. We don't want the house sitting unsold for months. Rebecca nodded. Exactly. And I think we could move quickly at this price point. I've already got a few potential buyers in mind. The realtor slid a listing agreement across the table. Daniel leaned forward, pen already in hand. If you sign today, we could have this photographed and listed by the weekend, Rebecca said. Evelyn opened her mouth to request more time to think, but Daniel was already initialing pages. Mom's excited to get this process moving, aren't you, Mom? Without waiting for her response, he continued signing. Each scratch of the pen felt like a small betrayal. The decision was sliding out of her control, like water through cupped hands. Rebecca gathered the signed documents with efficiency, tucking them into her leather portfolio. I'll have these processed right away. Expect my call tomorrow about scheduling the photographer. As the realtor walked toward the door, Evelyn felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same sensation she'd experienced when the doctor had told her about James's heart. She pressed her palm against her sternum, trying to calm the flutter beneath her ribs. The door closed behind Rebecca, and with it, Evelyn felt the first chapter of her life without James beginning to end as well. Evelyn sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by stacks of newspaper and half-filled boxes. Her arthritic fingers moved with careful precision as she wrapped each piece of her wedding china in newspaper. 47 years of Sunday dinners, Christmas feasts, and birthday celebrations all preserved in these delicate porcelain plates, with their faded blue flowers and gilded edges. She held up a teacup to the window light, turning it gently. A tiny chip marked the rim, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. James had dropped it during their 25th anniversary dinner, mortified at his clumsiness. Evelyn had laughed then, kissed his worried frown, and told him it gave the set character, just like the wrinkles on our faces, she said, marks of a life well lived. The house echoed differently now, emptier with each box she filled. Daniel had hired professional packers to come tomorrow, but Evelyn insisted on handling her treasures herself. Some things weren't meant for a stranger's hands. She wrapped a serving platter next, remembering Thanksgiving 1978, when it had held a turkey too big for their small family. They'd invited 3 elderly neighbors who had nowhere else to go. The laughter around the table that day had been the best seasoning. Remember that, James? She whispered to the empty room. Mrs. Abernathy bringing that terrible jello salad and everyone pretending to love it? The memory warmed her like sunshine on cold skin. She placed a wrapped platter in the box and reached for the gravy boat. This piece held the echo of Daniel as a toddler, reaching for it despite her warnings, sending gravy cascading across the tablecloth. His little face had crumpled in shame until James scooped him up, tickling him until tears turned to giggles. Evelyn pressed the gravy bowl to her chest for a moment before wrapping it. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Mrs. Peterson from next door stood on the porch with a casserole dish. "Thought you might not feel like cooking tonight," she said, eyes taking in the boxes. "That's very kind." Evelyn accepted the dish with a genuine smile. "We'll miss you something terrible." Mrs. Peterson's voice wavered. 40 years we've been neighbors." Evelyn nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. After Mrs. Peterson left, Evelyn returned to her packing. She wrapped the final teacup and sealed the box with packing tape, written in her neat handwriting on the side. China, fragile, memories. Outside, dusk painted the sky in watercolor purples and pinks. The moving truck rumbled up the driveway right on schedule. 2 young men in uniform knocked and presented their paperwork. "We'll start with the big furniture, ma'am," the taller one said. Evelyn nodded and stepped aside as they moved efficiently through her home. The dining room table where her family had gathered for thousands of meals, the bookcase James had built their first year of marriage, the grandfather clock that had marked the hours of their lives together. The house grew emptier by the minute. Soon, the living room contained only the old armchair she'd kept back for tonight. Evelyn lowered herself into it, feeling the familiar embrace of its cushions one last time. In the half-light of evening, with the movers working around her, she closed her eyes. The walls held the echoes of a lifetime laughter, tears, arguments, reconciliations, love in its many forms. "Lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the movers' footsteps, "give me strength for this new chapter. Help me carry these memories forward, even as I leave this place behind." The lawyer's office smelled of lemon polish and old books. Evelyn sat in the high-backed leather chair that made her feel small, like a child at an adult's desk. Papers spread before her in neat stacks, each marked with a yellow tab indicating where she needed to sign. Mr. Prescott, the lawyer, cleared his throat. "Once you sign these documents, Mrs. Carter, the sale will be final. The amount agreed upon is $78,000. Evelyn's heart constricted. 78,000. For the home that had cost them nearly that much 40 years ago. For the home that similar houses on their street had sold for 3 times as much. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's for the best, Mom. Quick sale, no hassle. You won't have to worry about repairs or taxes anymore." She looked up at her son's face. He seemed excited, almost eager, his eyes bright with something she couldn't quite name. "The market's tough right now," Daniel continued. "We're lucky to get this offer." Mr. Prescott slid the first document toward her. "This transfers the deed to the new owners." Evelyn's hands trembled as she picked up the pen. It felt heavy, like it was made of stone instead of metal. "Sign right there at the bottom," Daniel said, pointing. His voice held an edge of impatience. She pressed the pen to paper, her signature wobbly but legible. Page after page, she signed away the home where she'd raised her son, loved her husband, planted gardens, and celebrated holidays. With each signature, another piece of her heart detached. "Almost done," Mr. Prescott said kindly. "Just these closing forms." Daniel checked his watch. "The bank will wire the funds directly to your account, Mom. Less my commission and closing costs," the lawyer added. Evelyn signed the final page. Mr. Prescott gathered the documents, tapping them into a neat stack. "Congratulations," he said. "The sale is complete." Daniel beamed. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" Evelyn couldn't answer. Her throat felt tight, as if all the unsaid words were stuck there, forming a painful knot. Outside the office, Daniel checked his phone. "I've got a meeting in an hour. Can you get back to your apartment, all right?" "Yes," she managed. "I'll be fine." "Ah, great." He kissed her cheek quickly. "I'll call you tomorrow." She watched him hurry to his car, his steps light, unburdened, unlike her own. As evening fell, Evelyn stood on the sidewalk in front of her old house. The porch light was on a habit she'd never broken, turning it on at dusk. Tomorrow, the new owners would take possession. Young couple, expecting their first child. They'd live their own story within these walls. She clutched her small suitcase containing the few precious items she couldn't bear to pack away in storage. James's wedding ring, their photo albums, the Bible they received as a wedding gift. Slowly, Evelyn walked up the familiar path one last time. Her rose bushes lined the walkway, their fragrance sweet in the evening air. She'd planted them the spring after James died, one for each year of their marriage. At the door, she paused. The brass knocker gleamed in the porch light, the one James had polished every spring. She reached out, her weather fingers touching the cool metal, then the warm wood of the door itself. "Goodbye, old friend," she whispered. She pressed her palm flat against the door, as if blessing it, then turned away. Her steps were measured, dignified, though her heart ached with each one. She didn't look back as she walked down the street, her small suitcase in hand, the weight of memories far heavier than any luggage she carried. The key stuck in the lock. Evelyn jiggled it gently, the way the landlord had shown her earlier that week. With a reluctant click, the door swung open to reveal her new home. Apartment 14B, second floor, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, a combined living room and kitchen that echoed with emptiness. Evelyn stepped inside, setting her suitcase on the beige carpet. The air smelled of fresh paint and the lemon-scented cleaner the landlord had used. Not like home. Not like the scent of her roses or the lingering aroma of Sunday pot roast that had seeped into the walls of her old house. "Well," she said to no one, her voice bouncing off bare walls, "here we are." She moved to the window and pulled back the plain white curtains. The view offered little the parking lot, a dumpster, and beyond that, the back of a convenience store. No garden. No maple tree that had shaded her kitchen for 40 years. The few pieces of furniture she'd kept looked lost in the space. Her reading chair seemed smaller somehow. The small dining table with 2 chairs instead of 6 made her chest ache. Evelyn opened her suitcase on the bed, a new mattress, not the one where she slept beside James for decades. One by one, she removed her treasures. The wedding photo in its silver frame, the Bible with their names engraved on the cover, James's pocket watch that hadn't ticked in 20 years. Her fingers lingered on each item before finding a place. The wedding photo went on the nightstand, where it would be the first thing she saw each morning. The Bible on the small bookshelf, the watch in the drawer beside her bed. In the bathroom, she arranged her toiletries with care. The hand mirror James had given her on their 10th anniversary. The hairbrush she used so long the bristles were worn thin. The lavender soap she'd always favored. When everything was arranged just so, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed. The silence pressed in around her, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing below. She glanced at the clock, barely 7. The evening stretched before her, long and empty. No neighbors to wave to, no garden to tend, no familiar creaks and sighs of a house that had aged alongside her. From her purse, she pulled out the small black book Daniel had given her last Christmas, a journal she never used. The pages were cream-colored and smooth beneath her fingers. Evelyn found a pen and settled into her reading chair. Outside, darkness gathered as she opened to the first blank page. For a moment, she simply sat, uncertain what to write. What could she say about today that wouldn't sound like complaint or self-pity? She thought of the young couple moving into her home. How excited they looked during the walkthrough. How the woman had rested her hand on her growing belly, smiling as she imagined raising her child there. Life moved in circles. Their beginning, her ending. No, not an ending. A change. Slowly, Evelyn began to write. Not about what she lost, but about what might lie ahead. Her handwriting, once a schoolteacher's pride, wavered slightly but remained clear. When she finished, she read over the single line she'd written. "Lord, guide me in this new chapter." She closed the journal and held it against her heart. Outside her window, a star appeared in the darkening sky. Evelyn watched it, finding comfort in its steady light. Morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of apartment 14B, painting rectangles of light across Evelyn's small kitchen table. She sipped her tea, the same brand she'd drunk for 50 years, and tried to find comfort in the familiar taste, if not the surrounding. A knock at the door startled her. She wasn't expecting visitors. Daniel rarely came by without calling first, and she hadn't met any neighbors yet. She opened the door to find a courier in a blue uniform. "Mrs. Carter? Evelyn Carter?" "Yes, that's me. Package for you. Needs a signature." Evelyn signed the electronic pad with an unsteady hand and accepted a thick manila envelope. The return address bore the name of Simmons, Whitaker, attorneys at law, her brother, Robert's lawyers. "Thank you," she murmured. But the courier had already turned away, hurrying to his next delivery. Evelyn carried the envelope to her table, setting it down beside her teacup. Robert had passed 6 months ago. They hadn't been close in their later years, his farm was 3 states away, and travel had become difficult for both of them. Their conversations had dwindled to holiday phone calls and the occasional letter. She'd attended his funeral, of course. There had been few mourners. Robert, like her, had outlived his spouse. Unlike her, he'd had no children, just acres of land that had been in the family for generations. With careful fingers, she broke the seal and removed a stack of papers. A letter sat on top, the law firm's letterhead crisp and official. Dear Mrs. Carter, as executors of your brother Robert Carter's estate, we are pleased to inform you that all legal matters have been finalized. As the sole beneficiary named in your brother's will, we hereby confirm the transfer of all assets to your name. Evelyn blinked, reading the paragraph twice. Sole beneficiary? She'd expected perhaps a keepsake or two. Robert had never mentioned leaving her anything substantial. Her eyes moved down to the next paragraph. The total value of the estate, including liquid assets, investments, property sale proceeds, and insurance policies, amounts to 651.37. This sum has been transferred to the trust account established in your name as outlined in the enclosed document. The teacup slipped from her fingers, clattering against the saucer. $8 million? It couldn't be right. Robert had been a farmer his entire life, living simply in the same farmhouse where they'd grown up. She flipped through the remaining pages with trembling hands. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property assessments, all confirming the impossible figure. A handwritten note fell from between the pages. She recognized Robert's neat, compact handwriting immediately. Evie, if you're reading this, I've gone to join Martha. Don't be too surprised by what I'm leaving you. Turns out that worthless land Dad left us was sitting on natural gas. I leased the mineral rights 20 years ago and invested every penny. Never had much use for money myself, but I know you'll do something good with it. You always were the one with the big heart. Your brother, Robert. Tears blurred Evelyn's vision. She hadn't known. All those years of Christmas calls, and he'd never mentioned becoming wealthy. Just talked about his tomatoes and the weather, asked after Daniel, and complained about his arthritis. The room seemed to spin around her. Yesterday, she sold her home for a fraction of its worth, believing it necessary. Today, she was a millionaire. Evelyn clasped the letter to her chest, her heart pounding against the paper. The enormity of it overwhelmed her. Not just the money, but the responsibility, the timing, the possibilities. What do I do with this, Lord? She whispered, eyes closed, face tilted upward. 2 days after receiving the letter, Evelyn stood in the shadow of First Community Church's stained glass windows. She'd attended services here for 43 years, finding comfort in its familiar wooden pews and well-worn hymnals. Today, though, she came with a different purpose, clutching her handbag a little tighter than usual. Pastor John looked up from his desk when she knocked on his office door. Evelyn, what a pleasant surprise. Please come in. The pastor's kind eyes crinkled at the corners as he gestured to the chair across from him. At 65, he'd been her spiritual guide through the loss of her husband, through Daniel's difficult teenage years, through countless joys and sorrows. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment, Evelyn said, settling into the chair. My door is always open to you. How are you adjusting to the apartment? Evelyn sighed. It's different, but I'm managing. Pastor John nodded sympathetically. Change is never easy, especially at our age. Actually, that's partly why I'm here. Evelyn opened her purse and removed an envelope. I was hoping you might help me with something. She placed the envelope on his desk. I couldn't help noticing Sarah Miller last Sunday, the way she was praying so intently, and those children of hers trying so hard to be quiet. Pastor John's expression softened. Sarah's had a rough go since her husband left. 3 kids under 10, working 2 jobs. Is she behind on her rent? 3 months. The landlord's been patient, but he trailed off. Evelyn nudged the envelope forward. There's enough in there to cover what she owes, plus 2 months ahead. Could you see that she gets it? Anonymously, please. Pastor John's eyebrows rose. Evelyn, this is very generous. But please, John, The Lord has blessed me unexpectedly. I'm simply passing it along. After leaving the church, Evelyn called the bus to the edge of town. The Veterans Memorial Hall stood weathered and proud, its flagpole straight despite the building's sagging roof. Rain damage had left dark stains on the ceiling inside. She'd heard the veterans talking about it after church, how they couldn't afford repairs, how they might lose their gathering place. Inside, she found Bill Harrison, a Vietnam veteran who managed the hall. Mrs. Carter, what brings you out this way? Hello, Bill. I was just passing by and thought I'd see how things are going with the roof fund. Bill's face fell. Not great, if I'm honest. We're about 4-0 short, and winter's coming fast. Evelyn nodded, then reached into her purse for another envelope. I'd like to make a donation. Bill's eyes widened when he saw the check. Mrs. Carter, this covers everything we need. On one condition, she said. No one needs to know where it came from, but we want to thank you properly. Seeing the hall restored is thanks enough. That evening, Evelyn sat in her apartment, a cup of tea warming her hands. The space still didn't feel like home, but somehow it felt different tonight. Lighter, she thought of Sarah Miller and how she would feel opening her door to find Pastor John with news that her housing worries were over. She imagined the veterans gathering under a sound roof, rain no longer threatening their fellowship. For the first time since leaving her house, Evelyn felt a genuine smile spread across her face. She reached for a notepad and began to make a list. The after-school program needed new books. The hospital could use volunteers and perhaps a donation for their children's wing. The list grew longer as the evening deepened, each entry bringing with it a fresh spark of joy, like stars appearing one by one in the night sky. Daniel drummed his fingers against the polished mahogany table in the reception area of Greenfield Associates. His mother's affairs had always been handled by Old Man Greenfield himself, and Daniel had insisted on meeting with him about potential tax implications from the house sale. In truth, he just wanted to make sure his name was prominently featured in any financial discussions. His own bank account was dangerously close to empty. The receptionist smiled at him. Mr. Greenfield is just finishing up a call. It should only be a few more minutes. Daniel nodded and resumed his impatient drumming. Through the partially open door to Greenfield's office, he could hear the lawyer's muffled voice. Yes, Mrs. Carter, the funds have been transferred to your account. The full $8 million. Daniel froze. His heart skipped a beat. Your brother's investments were quite impressive. Greenfield continued. As I mentioned, there may be some tax considerations we should discuss at our next meeting, but the inheritance is legally yours now. $8 million? Daniel's mouth went dry. The words echoed in his head like thunder. His mother had inherited $8 million? A strange heat spread through his chest. $8 million, and she was living in that tiny apartment he'd convinced her to take. $8 million, and she hadn't said a word to him. Greenfield's voice continued. Softer now. I understand your desire for discretion, Mrs. Carter, but if I may suggest, your son should probably... Daniel didn't hear the rest. Blood rushed in his ears as he stood abruptly, startling the receptionist. Mr. Carter? Mr. Greenfield will be with you shortly. Something came up, he muttered, already heading for the door. I'll reschedule. Outside, he sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His mother had $8 million. While he was drowning in credit card debt, while he was living in an apartment with a leaking ceiling, while he was eating ramen noodles 3 nights a week, and she hadn't told him. His initial shock hardened into something darker as he drove. She must have known about this money when he was selling her house. She let him push that sale through as if they needed the money, as if downsizing was necessary. She'd watched him struggle for years, scraping by, when all along, by the time darkness fell, Daniel had worked himself into a righteous fury. He pounded on Evelyn's apartment door, not caring who might hear. Evelyn opened the door, her eyes widening at the sight of him. $8 million? He hissed, pushing past her into the small living room. You've been sitting on $8 million and didn't tell me? Evelyn closed the door quietly. How did you find out? Does it matter? What matters is you lied to me, your own son. Daniel paced the small room like a caged animal. I sold your house. I thought we needed the money. Daniel, please lower your voice. The neighbors? I don't care about the neighbors. I care about why my own mother would hide this from me. Evelyn sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly, but her voice remained steady. I received the inheritance after the house was sold, and I needed time to think. Think about what? How to keep it from me? Daniel's voice cracked. I'm your son. Evelyn moved toward the kitchen. I think we both need to calm down. Let me make us some tea, and we can talk about this properly. Tea? You think tea is going to fix this? No, she said gently. But it might help us talk to each other instead of at each other. Morning light streamed through the windows of the Millfield Community Center as Evelyn stepped inside. The building had seen better days. Water stains marked the ceiling, and the once vibrant bulletin boards now hung faded and half empty. Still, there was life here, a few elderly men playing checkers in the corner, a woman arranging coffee cups at a small refreshment table. Evelyn clutched her purse close to her body. Inside was the check she'd written after a sleepless night of prayer. Daniel's anger had shaken her, but it hadn't changed her mind about what needed to be done. Mrs. Carter, Frank Miller, the center's director, hurried toward her with a smile that brightened his weathered face. What a nice surprise. Can I get you some coffee? No, thank you, Frank. Evelyn glanced around at the worn furniture and peeling paint. I've come about something important. Frank guided her to a small office at the back of the center. A military service photo hung crookedly on the wall. Frank in his army uniform, decades younger. How are the programs doing? Evelyn asked, settling into a metal folding chair. Frank's smile faded. Not well, I'm afraid. The county cut our funding again. We had to cancel the Veterans Support Group and the Seniors Lunch Program. He sighed. Some of these folks, it's the only hot meal they get all week. Evelyn nodded, her resolve strengthening. That's why I'm here. She opened her purse and removed the check, sliding it across the desk. Frank's eyes widened as he registered the amount. Mrs. Carter, this island. This is $200,000. The senior programs meant everything to Henry after he passed, Evelyn said, thinking of her late husband. And I know what the veteran services did for my brother. Frank stared at the check, then at Evelyn. His hands trembled slightly. I don't understand. How? The Lord provides, Frank. Sometimes in unexpected ways. Evelyn smiled. I only ask that you keep my name quiet. I don't need recognition. Frank stood suddenly, rounded the desk, and embraced Evelyn. His voice broke as he whispered, You have no idea what this means. No idea at all. Evelyn patted his back. Use it where it's needed most. The lunch program, the veterans counseling, repairs to this building, whatever will help the most people. As they walked back through the main room, Frank's excitement bubbled over. He pointed around the space, already envisioning improvements. We'll fix that roof leak first thing, and we can bring back Ellen to coordinate the meals program. She knows exactly which seniors need the most help. Evelyn smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. This was right. This was exactly what the money was for. Across the street, Daniel sat in his parked car, watching the community center entrance. He'd followed his mother from her apartment, determined to find out what she was doing with his inheritance. When she emerged 40 minutes later, the center's director walked her out, grasping both her hands in his, gratitude written all over his face. Daniel's stomach churned. He knew that look. He'd seen it on the church pastor's face last week after his mother had visited. She was giving away the money. She was giving away HIS money. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel as he watched his mother walk down the street, a serene smile on her face. $200,000 would have paid off his debts. $200,000 would have been the down payment on the house he deserved. Instead, she was throwing it away on strangers. Not another penny, he whispered, his voice tight with fury. Not one more penny. 2 weeks after Evelyn's donation, Millfield Community Center buzzed with new life. Fresh blue paint covered the once peeling walls, and the playground equipment gleamed red and yellow in the afternoon sunday. Children's laughter filled the air as they raced up and down the slide and pumped their legs on the newly installed swings. Evelyn sat on a bench under the shade of an old oak tree, a paperback novel open but unread in her lap. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the scene before her, a transformation that had happened so quickly it seemed almost miraculous. Higher, Grandma, push me higher. A little girl with pigtails squealed as her grandmother gave her another gentle push on the swing. My goodness, Lily, you'll touch the clouds. The grandmother laughed. Two older men played chess at a new outdoor table, their faces intent on the game while a small crowd of onlookers offered unsolicited advice. Through the center's windows, Evelyn could see people moving about inside seniors gathering for the restored lunch program, veterans meeting in their support group. Betty Thompson, who ran the local bakery, settled onto the bench beside Evelyn with a contented sigh. Isn't it something? She said, nodding toward the playground. Frank says they had anonymous donations, fixed everything up practically overnight. It's wonderful, Evelyn agreed softly. Makes you wonder who it could be. Betty lowered her voice. Some folks think it might be that tech millionaire who bought the old Wilson property. Others say it's someone local. Whoever it is, they're changing this town. Evelyn just smiled. The secret warmed her heart like nothing else had since Henry passed. The veterans group is back on. Did you hear? Betty continued. My George hasn't missed a meeting. Says it's the only place where people understand what he went through in Vietnam. A lump formed in Evelyn's throat. I'm glad for him. Me too. Betty patted Evelyn's hand. He sleeps better now. The nightmares aren't as frequent. Across the playground, Frank caught Evelyn's eye and gave her a small, knowing nod. She nodded back, her heart so full it might burst. As the afternoon waned, Evelyn closed her book and stood to leave. She walked slowly past the playground, savoring the sounds of joy that filled the air. This was what wealth was for, not hoarding, but sharing. Not building walls, but bridges. Mrs. Carter, a young mother, waved from near the swings. Are you coming to the community dinner on Friday? They're restarting the weekly potlucks. I wouldn't miss it, Evelyn called back. She headed down Oak Street toward her apartment, her steps lighter than they had been in months. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. At the corner, she paused to admire the flower display outside Thompson's bakery, bright red geraniums in freshly painted planters. The town was coming alive again, and Evelyn felt alive with it. Half a block behind her, Daniel slipped out of the coffee shop where he'd been watching. His jaw clenched as he observed his mother's leisurely pace, the way she stopped to chat with neighbors, the smile that never left her face. He'd been following her for days now, tracking her movements, building a case, the community center, the veterans hall, the church fund for single mothers. He knew where every dollar had gone. Money that should have secured his future was being scattered to the winds. Daniel hung back, staying just far enough away that Evelyn wouldn't notice him. His hand clutched the phone where he'd been recording evidence for his lawyer. Enjoy it while it lasts, Mother, he whispered, his face hardening with bitterness as he followed her down the street. Evelyn had just settled into her armchair with a cup of chamomile tea when the pounding on her door began. The ceramic cup rattled in its saucer as the blows intensified. Mother, open this door right now. With a small sigh, she set her tea aside and made her way to the entrance. Daniel burst in the moment she turned the knob, his face flushed with anger. How could you? He paced the small living room like a caged animal. $8 million, Mother. $8 million. And you're just giving it away to strangers? Evelyn closed the door quietly. They're not strangers, Daniel. They're our neighbors. Our neighbors? He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Since when do neighbors have any claim to your money? To our family's money? Please sit down. Evelyn gestured to the couch. I'll make you some tea. I don't want tea. Daniel's voice rose. I want an explanation. That money could have changed our lives. My life. Evelyn folded her hands in front of her. The money has changed lives. Just yesterday, Frank told me that 3 veterans have found housing because of the program we? Daniel cut her off. There's no we. That was your inheritance. Our inheritance. Do you have any idea what I could have done with even half of that money? My debts would be gone. I could start fresh. Evelyn's eyes filled with compassion. Daniel, if you're struggling, I can help. That's not the point. He snatched up a small framed photo of himself as a child. The point is that you kept this from me. You sold that house for nothing when you knew you were about to be a millionaire. I didn't know when we sold the house, Evelyn said softly. The letter came after, and you decided to keep it a secret. His voice turned cold. Your own son. The only family you have left. I needed time to think, to pray about it, Daniel snorted. And God told you to give it all away? How convenient. The money was a blessing, Daniel. Blessings aren't meant to be hoarded. Foolishness. Daniel slammed the photo back onto the side table. Pure foolishness. Do you know what $8 million means? Security. Freedom. Never having to worry again. There are different kinds of security. Evelyn moved to the window, looking out at the street below. The kind that comes from knowing you've helped others. Others. Daniel's voice dripped with scorn. Always others. What about me, Mother? When do I matter? You've always mattered. Evelyn turned, her eyes shining with tears. More than anything in this world. Then prove it. Stop this ridiculous charity spree and help your son for once. Evelyn shook her head slowly. I can help you, but not by handing you millions. That wouldn't truly help you at all. Daniel stared at her for a long moment, his face a mask of disbelief. You really believe that, don't you? That you know what's best for everyone? I only know what feels right in my heart. Your heart. He grabbed his jacket from where he tossed it. Well, your heart is gonna cost you your relationship with your son. Daniel, please, no. He raised a hand to silence her. You've made your choice clear. He yanked the door open and stormed out, the slam echoing through the small apartment. The force of it knocked the painting slightly askew on the wall. Evelyn stood motionless for several seconds, tears streaming down her face. Then slowly, painfully, she lowered herself to her knees beside the armchair. Lord, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, don't let bitterness consume him. Help me know how to reach his heart. 3 weeks passed with no word from Daniel. Each morning, Evelyn checked her phone for messages that never came. Each evening, she prayed for a knock at her door that remained silent. Pastor Jim called on a Wednesday afternoon. Evelyn, could you stop by the community center tomorrow around 2? The roof contractor has some questions about the Veterans Hall renovation. Of course, she replied, making a note on her calendar. I'll be there. The following day, Evelyn wore her favorite blue cardigan with a simple brooch, a small silver cross that had been a gift from her husband. She walked slowly, enjoying the crisp autumn air that carried the scent of fallen leaves. The community center sat at the edge of the town square, its brick facade freshly tuck-pointed thanks to her anonymous donation. When she arrived, Pastor Jim waited outside. Beautiful day, isn't it? He said, offering his arm. Evelyn smiled and took it. Perfect for a walk. Now, what questions did the contractor have? Let's go inside first, he suggested, guiding her toward the double doors. The lobby was strangely dark. Pastor Jim led her down the hallway toward the main gathering room. Is there a power outage? Evelyn asked, squinting in the dim light. Pastor Jim just smiled and pushed open the double doors to the main hall. Surprise! Light flooded the room as dozens of people jumped to their feet. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and a banner stretched across the back wall reading, Thank you, Evelyn. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. The room was packed, veterans from the hall, mothers from the church, food pantry, nurses from the clinic where she'd funded new equipment, teachers, children, seniors, faces she recognized from town, some she'd helped directly, others she'd never met. Martha Jenkins rushed forward with a bouquet of yellow roses. These are from all of us, she said, pressing them into Evelyn's trembling hands. I don't understand, Evelyn whispered. Mayor Wilson stepped forward. We know, Evelyn. We know it was you behind all the anonymous donations. The Veterans Hall, the playground equipment, the clinic supplies, the food pantry, the school books. But how? Small towns have big ears, someone called out, prompting laughter. But I never wanted recognition, Evelyn protested softly. An elderly veteran stood up from his chair. That's exactly why you deserve it. They led her to a seat of honor, and one by one, people came forward to share how her generosity had touched their lives. A young mother described how the daycare scholarship meant she could finish nursing school. A veteran explained how the housing program had gotten him off the streets. A teacher showed photographs of children reading new books. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she listened. She never imagined her gifts could reach so far, touch so many. Finally, Mayor Wilson unveiled a simple bronze plaque. This will hang in the entrance of our community center. He read aloud, the Evelyn Carter Community Room, where generosity of spirit builds a better tomorrow. The crowd erupted in applause. A small child darted forward and wrapped her arms around Evelyn's knees. "Thank you for my books, Miss Evelyn." Something broke open inside Evelyn's heart, a place that had been lonely for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Here, surrounded by the warmth of community, of gratitude and genuine affection, she felt something she hadn't experienced since before her husband died. She felt loved not for what she gave, but for who she was. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching. "Thank you all for this precious gift." Daniel poured another whiskey, his third of the night. The amber liquid sloshed against the sides of the glass as his unsteady hand set the bottle down. Spread across his kitchen table were crumpled papers covered with numbers, crossed out and rewritten, each calculation more desperate than the last. $8 million. His mother had $8 million and hadn't told him. "My inheritance," he muttered, dragging his pen across the paper. "My money." He'd driven past the community center earlier that day, seen the cars parked outside, caught a glimpse of the banner through the window. They were celebrating her, giving away what should have been his future. Daniel took another gulp, wincing as the liquor burned his throat. He scribbled more numbers on the paper. If she'd already donated $50,000 to the Veterans Hall, $20,000 to the school, $30,000 to the clinic, how much was left? How much was she planning to throw away before he could stop her? The whiskey bottle was nearly empty now. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the water stain on his apartment ceiling. This place was barely better than a shoebox, a far cry from the life he deserved, the life he could have if only his mother would be reasonable. "All those years I looked after her," he said to the empty room. "All those times I checked on her, helped around the house." He conveniently forgot the missed visits, the borrowed money never repaid, the maintenance tasks he'd promised but never completed. On the wall hung a calendar with red circles marking bill due dates. His credit card was maxed out, the car payment was 2 months behind, and all the while, his mother was giving away millions to strangers. Daniel stumbled to his feet, knocking over the empty whiskey glass. It rolled across the table but didn't break. Nothing ever broke in his favor. "She's not thinking clearly," he said, pacing the small living room. "She's elderly, confused. That money would be safer with me." The thought took root, growing stronger with each pass across a worn carpet. Maybe that was the answer. His mother was nearly 80 years old. Who could expect her to manage such a large sum responsibly? Wasn't it his duty as her son to protect her from making rash decisions? Daniel checked his watch. Nearly midnight. Too late to call most people. But Frank Tanner wouldn't mind. Frank had been 3 years ahead of him in high school, now a lawyer with a reputation for taking cases others wouldn't touch. He fumbled with his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found the number. "Frank? It's Daniel Carter." He tried to steady his voice, to sound sober and concerned. "Sorry for calling so late, but it's an emergency. It's about my mother." Daniel sank onto the couch, running his free hand through his hair. "She's come into some money recently, a significant amount, and I'm worried she's not mentally capable of handling it. She's giving it away, Frank. Millions to people she barely knows." He listened as Frank asked questions, nodding even though the lawyer couldn't see him. "Yes, I think we need to petition for guardianship. She needs protection from herself and from people taking advantage of her generosity." Daniel's eyes drifted to the financial calculations on the table, to the overdue bills on the counter. "How soon can we file the papers? I want to move quickly. There's no telling how much she'll give away if we don't step in." As he hung up the phone, Daniel felt a surge of righteous purpose cutting through the alcohol haze. He wasn't being greedy. He was protecting his mother, and if that protection meant securing his own future too, well, that was just good planning. The wheels were in motion now. Soon, everything would be set right. 3 sharp knocks startled Evelyn from her morning devotional. She marked her place in her Bible with a pressed flower bookmark, a gift from the children at the community center, and made her way slowly to the door. "Coming," she called, adjusting her cardigan. Perhaps it was Mrs. Jenkins from down the hall wanting to share her cinnamon rolls again. When she opened the door, a stern-faced man in a dark suit stood before her. Not Mrs. Jenkins at all. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter?" His voice was flat, official. "Yes, that's me." Evelyn smiled politely, though something in his expression made her heart flutter with unease. I'm here to serve you with legal documents. He thrust a thick envelope toward her. You've been summoned to appear in court regarding a petition for guardianship filed by Daniel Carter. Evelyn's hands trembled as she accepted the envelope. The man asked her to sign a form confirming receipt, which she did mechanically. Her signature wobbly and uncertain. Have a good day, ma'am. With that, he turned and walked away. Evelyn closed the door and leaned against it, the envelope heavy in her hands. Guardianship. The word echoed in her mind as she made her way to the kitchen table. She knew what it meant. Daniel was trying to take control of her money, of her life. With shaking fingers, she opened the envelope and pulled out the papers. Legal terms jumped out at her: mental incapacity, financial irresponsibility, undue influence, her own son, her Daniel. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. This wasn't the time for tears. She reached for the phone and dialed Pastor Wells. Martha, it's Evelyn. I need a recommendation for a good lawyer. 2 hours later, Evelyn sat across from Sarah Harrington, a lawyer with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. The sunlight from the apartment window caught the silver in Sarah's dark hair as she reviewed the documents. Mrs. Carter, your son is claiming you're mentally unfit to manage your affairs, specifically the inheritance from your brother. Sarah looked up from the papers. He's alleging that your charitable donations demonstrate impaired judgment. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. I'm old, Miss Harrington, but I'm not confused. Every donation I've made has been after careful thought and prayer. Sarah nodded. Tell me about these donations. Evelyn spoke of the Veterans Hall with its leaking roof, the single mother who'd been facing eviction, the children's program that needed art supplies. She described how she sat with each need, considered it, prayed over it. I didn't just throw money around, she explained. I wanted to help where it would matter most. And these were your decisions alone? No one pressured you? Only the Lord's nudging. Evelyn smiled faintly. Sarah closed her folder with a decisive snap. Mrs. Carter, I believe you, and I believe we can win this case. Your son has no grounds for this petition. You are clearly of sound mind. They discussed strategy, court dates, and witnesses who could testify to Evelyn's mental clarity. By the time Sarah packed up her briefcase, the afternoon shadows had lengthened across the floor. Try not to worry, Sarah said, patting Evelyn's hand. We'll fight this together. After showing Sarah out, Evelyn returned to her rocking chair by the window. Outside, children played in the park she'd helped renovate. Their laughter drifted up, a balm to her aching heart. She closed her eyes, hands clasped tightly in prayer. Lord, she whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet apartment. Don't let this destroy the good. This money was meant to be a blessing, not a curse. Help Daniel see that before it's too late for both of us. The Oakwood County Courthouse buzzed with whispers. Familiar faces from church, the grocery store, and neighborhood streets filled the wooden benches, their curious eyes darting between Evelyn and Daniel. News of the lawsuit had spread through town faster than dandelion seeds in spring wind. She's giving away millions, a woman near the back murmured. Her own son's just trying to protect what's rightfully his. That money was her brother's, not Daniel's, countered another voice. Besides, I heard she paid for Jenny Miller's cancer treatments. How is that being irresponsible? Evelyn sat straight back at the defendant's table, her blue cardigan buttoned neatly despite the courtroom's warmth. She focused on a spot on the wall, ignoring the stares that pricked her skin like needles. Next to her, Sarah Harrington organized papers with steady hands. Across the aisle, Daniel refused to meet his mother's eyes. His jaw tightened whenever she glanced his way. Your Honor, Daniel's lawyer, Mr. Prescott, paced before the judge. Mrs. Carter has given away nearly $2 million in just 3 months. No sound-minded person would distribute their wealth so carelessly. He gestured dramatically toward Evelyn. This is a woman who, at 78, has become increasingly confused. She gave $10,000 to a woman she barely knows from church. She donated $50,000 to refurbish a playground. These are not the actions of someone thinking clearly about their financial security. The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver-rimmed glasses, watched Evelyn carefully. Mrs. Carter once asked her neighbor what day was 3 times. In the same conversation, Prescott continued, Her own son has witnessed her forgetting to turn off the stove, misplacing her medications, and becoming disoriented in familiar settings. Evelyn's hands tightened in her lap. That day she'd asked about repeatedly had been the anniversary of her husband's death, a day that always left her disoriented with grief. The stove incident happened once when Daniel had called with upsetting news. But seated beneath the court's high ceiling, these moments were twisted into evidence of her failing mind. We simply asked the court to appoint Daniel Carter as guardian of his mother's estate before she gives away every penny to strangers and finds herself destitute, dependent on the state for care. When Sarah rose to cross-examine Daniel's first witness, his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson Evelyn, sent up a silent prayer. "Mrs. Patterson, you testified that Mrs. Carter seemed confused about her finances," Sarah began. "Could you please tell the court exactly what she said?" Mrs. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. "Well, she mentioned wanting to help people, said something about blessings not being meant for hoarding. And this struck you as confusion rather than generosity? Well, Have you ever known Mrs. Carter to be anything but thoughtful and deliberate in her decisions during the 20 years you've been neighbors?" "No. But thank you, Mrs. Patterson. No further questions." The day dragged on with more witnesses. With each testimony against her, Evelyn felt a physical weight pressing down on her shoulders. Yet she remained composed, her faith a quiet anchor. As the judge adjourned for the day, the courthouse emptied into dusky twilight. Evelyn rose slowly, her legs stiff from sitting. A wave of dizziness washed over her. Pastor Wells appeared at her side, offering his arm. "Let me help you, Evelyn." She leaned gratefully against him, feeling suddenly every one of her 78 years. "Thank you, Pastor." "How are you holding up?" he asked gently as they descended the courthouse steps. Evelyn sighed, watching Daniel stride to his car without a backward glance. "My heart is heavy, but my faith isn't. The Lord knows what he's doing, even when I don't." The weight of the trial pressed down on her spirit as the evening shadows lengthened across the town square, but Evelyn Carter walked on one small step at a time. Evelyn woke to gray light filtering through thin curtains. She hadn't slept well. The trial had seeped into her dreams, transforming the courthouse into a maze where Daniel's accusing voice echoed from unseen corners. Her body felt heavier than usual, bones aching as she pushed herself to sitting. "Oh, Lord," she whispered, pressing fingers against her temples. The clock read 6:18 a.m. The apartment felt smaller this morning, its bare walls closing in. Nothing like the house on Maple Street, with its high ceilings and morning light that danced across the oak floors. Her new home had never felt so empty. She shuffled to the kitchenette, filled the kettle with shaking hands. As steam began to rise, Evelyn stared out the small window overlooking the parking lot. Was this worth it? The question had plagued her since the trial began. Her giving had brought joy to so many, but at what cost? Her relationship with her only child lay in ruins. The town she'd called home for 50 years now buzzed with gossip about her mental state. People she'd known for decades had testified against her. The kettle whistled. Evelyn poured hot water over a tea bag, watching the color bleed into the cup. "Did I misunderstand your purpose, Lord?" she asked the empty room. The inheritance had seemed such a clear blessing, a chance to help others after a lifetime of modest means. Now it felt like a test she was failing. She carried her tea to the small table where her Bible lay open. The pages fell to Proverbs. "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." Evelyn touched the worn page. "I don't feel very refreshed right now," she admitted quietly. Daniel's words from yesterday's testimony echoed. "My mother has always been kind to a fault. Now she's being taken advantage of by people who see her as an easy mark." Perhaps he was right. Perhaps her giving was foolish, naive. She donated to the children's hospital, paid off medical bills for 3 veterans, funded new programs at the community center. What if those resources should have been saved? What if Daniel was right that she'd end up penniless, a burden? The doubt settled heavy on her shoulders as she dressed slowly in a simple blue dress and cardigan. She couldn't face another day in court feeling this way. Evelyn knelt beside her bed, hands clasped. "Lord, I need your guidance. If I've misunderstood, show me. If this path is right, give me strength to walk it." When she finally rose, her knees protesting, Evelyn noticed something white beneath her door, a small envelope pushed through the narrow gap. She bent carefully to retrieve it, recognizing neither the handwriting nor the return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the penmanship slightly uneven. Dear Mrs. Carter, you don't know me well. I'm Michael Donovan, Army veteran. I was at the VA when you paid for my surgery last month. The doctor said without it, I had maybe 6 months. When they told me an anonymous donor had covered everything, I broke down crying right there. I've been trying to find out who you were for weeks. Yesterday at the courthouse, I finally understood it was you. I wanted you to know your gift didn't just pay for an operation. It gave me back my life. My daughter will have her father at her graduation next year because of you. Don't let them convince you that kindness is foolishness. Some of us are alive because of your generosity. With eternal gratitude, Michael. The letter trembled in Evelyn's hand as tears blurred her vision. She clutched the paper to her chest, a quiet sob escaping her lips. The morning light seemed brighter now, breaking through the gray as her tears fell freely. The next morning, Evelyn opened her door to find Mrs. Jenkins from the senior center standing there with a pot of daffodils. These aren't much compared to what you've done, the woman said, her weather hands trembling slightly as she offered the bright flowers. But the art class you funded saved my sanity after Arthur passed. I just wanted you to know. Evelyn embraced her, too moved for words. By afternoon, 3 more visitors had come, a young mother whose children now had winter coats, the librarian thankful for the new children's section, and Pastor Williams bringing a basket of muffins and prayers. The congregation is behind you, Evelyn, he said, squeezing her hand. Whatever happens in that courtroom. On the second day, a small group of veterans arrived together, caps in hand, standing awkwardly in her tiny living room. We've never been ones for speeches, their informal leader said, a tall man with a silver crew cut. But that new therapy program you funded? Jim here hasn't had nightmares for the first time in 40 years. The shortest among them nodded, eyes glistening. First time I've slept through the night since Vietnam. Each evening brought more knocks at her door. Teachers, nurses, parents of scholarship recipients. Some she recognized, others were strangers connected to her only through the ripples of her giving. They brought casseroles, flowers, handwritten cards. By the 4th day, Evelyn could barely move through her apartment. Vases occupied every surface, greeting cards stood propped on bookshelves, and the refrigerator overflowed with more food than she could possibly eat. That afternoon, Marjorie Henderson, who ran the town newspaper, arrived with a stack of letters. These came to our office for you, she explained. Words gotten around about the trial. People wanted to show support. Evelyn sat at her small kitchen table reading for hours. A child's crayon drawing thanked her for new playground equipment. A college student wrote about finishing her degree because of Evelyn's scholarship fund. An elderly man explained how the meals program she supported meant he no longer went to bed hungry. Some messages were short, just a line or two of gratitude. Others filled pages with stories of lives transformed. Each one touched her deeply, like water to parched soil. On the 6th day, Evelyn found herself running out of places for flowers. The sweetness of lilies, roses, and carnations filled her apartment with fragrance. Cards and letters covered her coffee table in colorful piles. She pulled a sturdy cardboard box from her closet, one she saved from the move, and carefully began collecting the letters. Her fingers traced the different handwritings, from the shaky penmanship of the elderly to the careful printing of children. Each represented a life touched, a burden eased, a dream made possible. As she organized them, Evelyn remembered Daniel's harsh words in court. She's throwing away her security on strangers who only want her money. But these weren't strangers anymore. Through their gratitude, they had become part of her extended family, people whose lives had intertwined with hers through acts of kindness. Their stories gave weight and substance to what had begun as simple faith. Placing the last letter in the box, Evelyn ran her hand across the collection. She would bring these to court not as evidence, but as reminders of why she fought. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was possibility, hope, transformation. Lord, she whispered, closing the box gently, thank you for showing me I chose rightly. With renewed determination, Evelyn straightened her shoulders. Tomorrow, she will return to court, not just defending her right to give, but championing the good that giving had already accomplished. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as Evelyn entered, her steps small but steady. Her lawyer carried the box of letters she'd collected, placing it carefully beside their table. Daniel sat across the aisle, his jaw tight, eyes darting between his mother and the growing crowd, filling the benches behind her. Judge Harris adjusted his glasses, scanning the packed room. I understand the defense has witnesses prepared to testify regarding Mrs. Carter's mental capacity and decision-making abilities. Evelyn's lawyer stood. Yes, Your Honor. The community has come forward in significant numbers. The first witness was Ellen Foster, head nurse at Riverside Medical Center. She smoothed her uniform as she took the stand. Mrs. Carter funded our children's wing renovation, she explained, her voice clear and professional. But what impressed me wasn't the money. It was how she asked detailed questions about equipment needs, staffing requirements, and long-term maintenance costs. She understood exactly what she was investing in. The veterans came next, three men who stood together, the tallest speaking for them all. "Ma'am's sharp as a tack," he said, nodding respectfully toward Evelyn. "When she funded our PTSD program, she requested quarterly reports and specific outcome metrics. That's not someone who's confused about her finances." Daniel shifted uncomfortably as Sarah Jenkins, the elementary school librarian, described how Evelyn had negotiated reduced prices with publishers to maximize her donation's impact. "She stretched every dollar," Sarah explained. "Mrs. Carter made that money work harder than anyone I've ever seen." Throughout the morning, a steady stream of townspeople took the stand. The young mother who'd received help with her mortgage, the community center director who detailed Evelyn's insistence on sustainable programming rather than quick fixes. Each testimony painted a portrait not of a confused elderly woman, but of someone making deliberate, thoughtful choices. During a brief recess, Daniel approached his mother, voice low and urgent. "This parade of charity cases doesn't change anything. You're still being reckless with our family's money." Evelyn looked at her son, sorrow etching her face. "It was never our money, Daniel. It was a gift to be shared." When court resumed, Judge Harris leaned forward as Pastor Williams took the stand. "I've known Evelyn Carter for 27 years, the pastor said. "Her mind is clear, her judgment sound. She's always been generous, but never foolish. The inheritance simply gave her greater means to express the character she's always had." As the afternoon wore on, Daniel's lawyer tried to paint the witnesses as beneficiaries with obvious bias, but their sincerity proved difficult to dismiss. Each person spoke not just of Evelyn's gifts, but of her sharp questions, careful planning, and insistence on accountability. The final witness was Dr. Margaret Chen, a geriatric specialist who had evaluated Evelyn the previous week. Mrs. Carter scored exceptionally well on all cognitive assessments. Dr. Chen testified, "Her decision-making capacity is fully intact. In my professional opinion, she is more than capable of managing her own financial affairs." As the testimony concluded, Judge Harris removed his glasses, studying Daniel with unmistakable disappointment. His eyes moved to Evelyn, who sat with quiet dignity despite the emotional day. Evelyn lowered her head, hands folded in her lap. Her lips moved in silent prayer, not for victory, but for healing for her son, for herself, for the breach between them that seemed to widen with each passing day. Judge Harris cleared his throat. "We'll reconvene tomorrow morning for my ruling." Morning light streamed through the tall courthouse windows as Judge Harris entered the courtroom. Everyone rose, the rustle of clothing and clearing of throats breaking the tense silence. Evelyn stood with her hands clasped at her waist, her face serene despite the weight of the moment. Daniel straightened his tie, confidence still etched across his features. His lawyer leaned in, whispering reassurances that made him nod sharply. "Be seated," Judge Harris said, settling into his chair. He arranged several papers before him, taking his time as the courtroom quieted completely. "I've reviewed all testimony and evidence in the matter of Carter versus Carter." His voice carried easily through the hushed room. "This case centers on the fundamental question. Is Evelyn Carter of sound mind and capable of managing her own financial affairs?" Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, her lips moving in silent prayer. "The law is clear about the high threshold required to declare someone incompetent," Judge Harris continued. "It requires substantial evidence of diminished capacity, evidence that was not only not presented in this courtroom, but thoroughly contradicted by expert testimony and numerous character witnesses. Daniel's jaw tightened. His fingers drummed against the table. Mrs. Carter has demonstrated remarkable clarity in her financial decisions. Her charitable giving shows thoughtful planning, careful consideration, and consistent follow-through. These are not the actions of someone with diminished capacity. The judge looked directly at Daniel now, his expression stern but not unkind. This court finds absolutely no legal basis to interfere with Mrs. Carter's financial autonomy. She is unquestionably competent to manage her own affairs, including her inheritance, in whatever manner she sees fit. A soft murmur of approval rippled through the courtroom. Several people reached out to touch Evelyn's shoulders. Furthermore, Judge Harris continued, this court is troubled by what appears to be an attempt to control Mrs. Carter's assets rather than genuine concern for her welfare. The plaintiff's case lacked merit from the beginning. Daniel's face flushed dark red. He shoved back his chair. The petition is denied. Mrs. Carter retains full control of her finances, and I'm ordering the plaintiff to pay all court costs and reasonable attorney fees. The judge's gavel struck with finality. This matter is closed. The courtroom erupted in subdued celebration. Evelyn remained seated, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous, he hissed, loud enough for those nearby to hear. She's being manipulated by the whole town. They just want her money. His lawyer placed a restraining hand on his arm, but Daniel shook it off. He gathered his papers with jerky movements, shoving them into his briefcase. Daniel, Evelyn called softly, reaching toward him. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Don't, he snapped, slamming his briefcase shut. With quick, angry steps, he pushed through the courtroom doors, leaving them swinging in his wake. A heavy silence followed his departure. Evelyn's shoulders slumped slightly, but she straightened them again, dignity intact. She rose slowly and approached the bench where Judge Harris was gathering his papers. Thank you, Your Honor, she said, her voice soft but steady. Not for ruling in my favor, but for seeing the truth. Judge Harris looked down at her, his stern expression softening. The law exists to protect people, Mrs. Carter. Today, it did exactly what it should. Evelyn nodded, a small smile touching her lips. God's justice works in many ways, she said. I'll keep praying for my son, as you should, the judge replied kindly. As you should. The courthouse steps gleamed in the afternoon sun as people filtered out, their voices filled with relief and congratulation. Evelyn stood at the top of the stairs, searching the small crowd below. Her lawyer touched her elbow gently. Mrs. Carter, we should discuss next steps, perhaps over lunch? In a moment, Evelyn said, her eyes catching a familiar silhouette near the parking lot. There's something more important I need to do first. She made her way carefully down the stone steps, her hand gripping the railing. Each step sent a small twinge through her arthritic knees, but Evelyn barely noticed. Her focus remained fixed on her son's retreating figure. Daniel, she called, her voice carrying across the courthouse lawn. He didn't turn around. His shoulders stiffened as he quickened his pace toward his car. Evelyn hurried as much as her aging body allowed. Daniel, please wait. When she finally reached him, she caught his arm. Daniel stopped, keys clutched tightly in his hand, but kept his gaze fixed on the ground. Lines of anger etched his face. What do you want? His voice sounded hollow, drained of the fury that had animated him in the courtroom. Haven't you humiliated me enough? I never wanted to humiliate you. Evelyn's hand remained on his arm, feeling the tension beneath his sleeve. This was never about winning or losing. Daniel scoffed. Right, you just wanted to prove I'm not fit to help you, that I don't know what's best. No, Evelyn's voice grew firmer. I wanted the freedom to use this blessing in the way I believe God intended. A couple passed by, whispering and glancing their way. Daniel's jaw tightened. Everyone in town thinks I'm a monster now, he muttered. My own mother dragged me through court, made me look like I was after her money. You brought the lawsuit, Daniel. Evelyn's words were gentle but direct. And yes, you were after the money. We both know that. For the first time, Daniel met her eyes. The raw pain there startled her. Beneath his anger lay something deeper, a wounded child still seeking approval, still feeling he didn't measure up. I just want it. He struggled with the words. You never thought I could handle anything important. You never trusted me. Evelyn's heart ached at the misunderstanding that had built up over decades. It wasn't about trust, son. It was about purpose. This money came to me for a reason, and that reason wasn't to fix past mistakes or build fortunes. Daniel looked away again, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears of frustration. I need to go. I know. Evelyn's hand slipped from his arm. The distance between them felt wider than the physical space separating them. Years of misaligned expectations and unspoken disappointments stretched between mother and son. I want you to know something, she said, her voice catching. No matter what's happened, no matter what you've done or what you think of me, I forgive you, son. Daniel's hand tightened around his keys until his knuckles turned white. Without a word, he turned and walked to his car. Evelyn stood in the parking lot, watching as he drove away. The pain in her chest felt physical, a mother's heart breaking for her child. Yet, alongside the pain flickered something else, a quiet hope that forgiveness, once offered, might someday find fertile ground. She turned her face toward the sun, letting its warmth dry the tears on her cheeks. The battle was over, but the harder work of healing had just begun. 3 weeks after the trial, Evelyn sat at a polished oak table in the Millfield Community Bank's conference room. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting warm rectangles across the documents spread before her. Around the table sat Mayor Wilson, Pastor Green from her church, Dr. Abernathy from the medical clinic, and Miss Jenkins, the high school principal. Mr. Harmon, her kind-faced attorney, stood at the whiteboard sketching out the organizational structure. The Carter Community Foundation, Mr. Harmon said, underlining the name. Established in honor of Edward Carter, to serve the people of Millfield for generations to come. Evelyn traced her late brother's name on the draft letterhead. Edward had lived simply, invested wisely, and died quietly, never knowing how his lifelong frugality would transform an entire community. We've outlined the 5 main focus areas, Mayor Wilson said, tapping a folder. Healthcare assistance, educational scholarships, veteran support, housing security, and small business grants. Pastor Green leaned forward. Evelyn, are you certain about the amount? $5 million is a tremendous gift. Quite certain. Evelyn's voice was soft but firm. The remaining money will sustain me comfortably, and whatever's left will join the foundation later. This way, I can see the good it does while I'm still here. Miss Jenkins wiped a tear from her eye. Do you know how many children will go to college because of this? How many dreams will come true? Evelyn's mind drifted to the empty swings at the park she'd passed on her way here, soon to be filled with laughing children. To the Veterans Hall where lonely old soldiers would find companionship. To families who wouldn't lose their homes during hard times. That's precisely why we're here, she said. Dreams matter. Mr. Harmon distributed pens. The bylaws ensure the foundation remains focused on local needs, with transparent administration and community oversight. Evelyn glanced at the empty chair she'd requested be placed at the table. She had sent Daniel an invitation to join the board, mailing it with a note, "There's a place for you here if you want it." He hadn't responded, but she kept the seat open anyway. Dr. Abernathy cleared his throat. Mrs. Carter, before we sign, I want you to know something. Last month, a young mother came to my clinic with her sick child. She told me she couldn't afford the medication. I was able to help her because of your donation to our emergency fund. That child is healthy today because of you. Similar stories follow from the mayor about families keeping their homes, from the principal about students receiving tutoring, from the pastor about elderly folks getting hot meals. Each account filled Evelyn's heart like water filling a desert basin after rain. When they finished speaking, Evelyn picked up her pen. Her hand trembled slightly, not from age, but from the weight of the moment. My brother Edward never married, never had children, she said. He once told me his greatest regret was leaving nothing behind. He would be so pleased to know his name will now be connected to hope rather than absence. One by one, they signed the documents. When Evelyn's turn came, she wrote her name with care, the ink flowing across the paper like a promise. She set down the pen and looked around at these good people, who would steward this blessing long after she was gone. In her mind's eye, she saw children yet unborn receiving diplomas, families finding shelter, veterans healing from invisible wounds. Evelyn smiled softly. It's done, she whispered. And it's just beginning. The May sunshine bathed Millfield in golden light as townsfolk gathered at the newly completed community center playground. Red, blue, and yellow balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze, tied to freshly painted benches. Children darted between jungle gyms and swing sets, their laughter rising like music above the murmur of adult conversation. Evelyn sat in the place of honor, a small corsage of white roses pinned to her cardigan. She watched two young girls chase each other across a spongy safety surface that would protect little knees from scrapes. Just 3 months ago, this space had been an empty lot filled with weeds and trash. Mayor Wilson tapped the microphone setup near the ribbon-draped entrance. If I could have everyone's attention, please. The crowd quieted, parents calling children back to their sides. Evelyn felt a flutter of nerves as all eyes turned toward the small stage. Today, the mayor began, we celebrate more than just a playground or a building. We celebrate the heart of a woman who reminded us what community truly means. From her seat, Evelyn spotted familiar faces, the veteran whose medical bills she'd paid, the single mother whose rent she covered, the teacher whose classroom supplies she'd funded. Each smiled back at her with recognition, with gratitude. Pastor Green took the microphone next. The good book tells us that a generous person will prosper, and whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Evelyn Carter has lived this truth among us. A small boy, no more than 5, broke free from his mother's grasp and ran to Evelyn, offering her a slightly crushed dandelion. She accepted it with the same reverence she would show a rare orchid. Thank you, she whispered to him, tucking the weed behind her ear. Miss Jenkins from the high school approached the microphone. The Edward Carter Scholarship Fund has already accepted its first 12 recipients. These students, she gestured to a group of teenagers standing proudly with their parents, will be the first in their families to attend college. One by one, community members shared stories of how the foundation had touched their lives. With each testimony, Evelyn felt her heart expand. This was so much more than she had ever dreamed possible when she'd received that lawyer's letter months ago. Finally, the mayor invited her forward. Mrs. Carter, would you do us the honor? 2 children gently took her hands and helped her to the ribbon. Someone passed her a large pair of scissors with red handles. I'm not one for speeches, Evelyn said, her voice soft but steady. But I want to thank you all for helping me turn what could have been just money into something precious, a community that takes care of its own. She paused, looking over the crowd. For a brief moment, she thought she glimpsed Daniel at the back, partially hidden behind a tree. But whether he was really there or just a hopeful vision from a mother's heart, she couldn't be sure. My late husband used to say that true wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you give away with love. Evelyn positioned the scissors against the ribbon, her hands trembling slightly. The crowd began to count down. 3, 2, 1. The blaze closed. The ribbon fell away. Applause erupted across the playground, punctuated by the release of dozens more balloons into the clear blue sky. Children rushed forward, streaming past Evelyn into their new playground. Parents embraced her. Elderly neighbors dabbed at their eyes. In that moment, surrounded by joy and gratitude, Evelyn Carter had never felt richer. As the celebration continued around her, Evelyn found a quiet moment to slip away to a bench beneath a young maple tree. From this spot, she had a perfect view of the playground. Children climbed, swung, and chased each other with boundless energy, their faces bright with joy. Just 6 months ago, she had sat alone in her empty house on Maple Street, wondering how life could possibly go on. Now, watching 2 little girls take turns pushing each other on the swing set, Evelyn marveled at how thoroughly everything had changed. Is this seat taken? Evelyn looked up to see Mrs. Henderson, her neighbor from the old neighborhood. Please join me. Evelyn patted the bench beside her. Mrs. Henderson settled down with a contented sigh. Who would have thought selling that old house would lead to all this? Evelyn's gaze drifted across the playground to the new community center beyond its windows gleaming in the late afternoon Sunday. The building housed a food pantry, veteran services, after-school programs, and a senior center where elders taught young people forgotten skills like quilting and woodworking. God works in mysterious ways, Evelyn said softly. A small boy with untied shoelaces raced past, followed by his harried mother. Evelyn smiled, remembering Daniel at that age before money and ambition had hardened his heart. She still set a place for him at her small dinner table every Sunday, hoping one day he might come. "You've given this town its heart back," Mrs. Henderson said, patting Evelyn's hand. "No," Evelyn shook her head. "The heart was always here. It just needed a little nurturing to bloom again." As the words left her mouth, Evelyn's eyes drifted to the rose garden planted along the community center's front wall. She had insisted on roses, the same variety she'd tended for 40 years at her old home. They were just beginning to open, deep crimson against the pale brick. The afternoon mellowed into evening. Parents gathered children, teenagers helped pack away the celebration supplies, and the playground gradually emptied. Still, Evelyn sat, treasuring the peaceful moment. She thought of all she had lost: the house where she raised her son, the garden she tended with her husband, the familiar creaks of floorboards that had told the story of her life. Yet somehow, in losing these things, she had gained so much more: purpose, community, and the knowledge that her life had made a difference. Pastor Green stopped by to check on her before leaving. "Need a ride home, Evelyn?" "Thank you, but I'd like to stay a bit longer," she replied. "It's such a beautiful evening." The last stragglers departed, leaving Evelyn alone as the sun began its descent. Golden light spilled across the playground, painting everything in warm honey tones. In the distance, the town's church bells chimed 6 o'clock. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the gentle weight of contentment settle over her. The breeze carried the sweet scent of roses from the garden, her roses, transplanted to new soil yet thriving all the same. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, her lips curving into a smile, "for letting me turn betrayal into blessing." Behind her, the roses nodded in the evening breeze, each bloom fully open, their petals catching the last rays of sunlight like tiny cups filled with gold. If you enjoyed the story of Evelyn Carter, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.